Hello, 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 everybody. Just checking everything to make sure that we're in good shape here, and then we will get rolling, which is very exciting. Okay, I think everything is set up accordingly. Just to remind everybody, our Q&A box is open. I am going to share my PowerPoint with you now so that we can stay on track. Because that is generally one of the bigger challenges, as you can imagine. Okay, today, this topic's a little different than our typical topic, but I gotta tell you, I love it. It's less scientific in nature, but if you can stay with me through the thought process, it will give you a lot of really great communication points to be able to communicate with your patients on the costs and the benefits of neurofeedback training. And here I wrote by season, but really what we're thinking about is if it's going to be more beneficial for a person to use neurofeedback in the summer versus during the school year. And before I continue, this is appropriate for parents and children alike. And we're going to start by characterizing semester brain and then summer brain. But remember that these characterizations, first of all, are going to be global, but secondly, they're basically going to affect families. So if it is true for the child, it's usually true for their parent. So it can be appropriate to think about this aspect of neurofeedback training for adults also, is my point, that semester brain and summer brain do not only apply to children, it definitely applies to people who are parents, adults who are parents, because their routine will change. And it can hold true for just adults in general. So let's think about what is semester brain first of all. Semester brain is is a person's brain performance pattern during the academic year. So the seasons we're talking about are fall, back to school definitely counts, fall, winter, and spring. So the characterization of semester brain is people get up early. I can give you my life because I'm a perfect example on steroids. So during the semester, we have to get 5 school-age children up before 6 o'clock. My teenagers get up at about 5:30. Because their bus comes at 7 a.m. So they're up at about 5:40 to give themselves enough time. We have to feed 5 kids, get them out the door. We make them lunches every single day. So that's a lot of running around for the kids. And then I help them because it's a lot of work for all of us. And this way we can get out within an hour and change. So very early mornings, which can be good and bad because we're going to talk about fatigue. Homework. So again, I write this on an upcoming slide that this will be very dependent upon a child's school situation. So at our office at Leigh Brain & Spine, we work with kids in every type of school. So we work with kids that do homeschooling, and actually we work with kids that do homeschooling that's fairly lax. We work with kids that do intense type of homeschooling. We work with kids in charter schools that tend to be a blend of rigor and relaxation. We work with a lot of kids that are in the public school, and here where we're located, and unfortunately across the country, gym and phys ed time is being taken out as a constant for children. At my kids' middle school, which they absolutely abhor, they have mandatory walk around time, but they have to walk in a circle. So clearly that doesn't give them the blow off of energy that they're looking for because it's still organized, it's short, and they have to walk around in a circle, which they don't like at all. Who would, right? So we deal with kids, we work with kids that have all kinds of things going. So we work with kids that go to very intense schools that have 4 to 5 hours of homework every night. And we work with kids that are also in extracurricular activities, many of them. So all of that is going to matter, but typically that tends to be happening more during the semester than during the summer. There's a lot of social issues for children, and if you work with kids, this affects elementary kids, absolutely affects middle school, not middle age, but middle school children and high school children. Also, there's a ton of social aspects going on. We know socialization is difficult for children that have ADHD because of their brain pattern. And clearly kids that have anxiety or social anxiety especially can have significant difficulty in the social realm. So there's lots of socialization going on, and that can be of a major challenge for kids. Lots of stress because of the cognitive load that is associated with school, how much work there is. They have to sustain attention for long periods of time, or their grades are at risk. They have to sit still for long periods of time. Cognitive load is how hard it is for them to think and to bring everything together. And a good or possibly difficult, I suppose each one of those has their own pros and cons, is that there tends to be more routines and rituals during the school year, again, for parents and for children. So this week's my kid's first week off from school, and we have a very tight routine during the school year, and we have a limited routine in the summer. We have not settled into it yet, but during the school year, like I told you, the kids are up 5:45. They're out the door by 7. Then I'm usually ready by then. I'm up very early, and I hit the ground running to work. I have all the way until 3:30 to myself. Now these little children are around 24/7, which makes it more difficult for people to work. So there is that stress in both aspects, but less routines and rituals. And again, it depends on the school structure. So that's very important. I always ask people in the office where they go to school and what their school is like, so I can get a sense of that and how that is impacting their brain performance. And we'll talk more about that. Family dynamics. So remember, and familial propensity. Remember, brains don't fall far from the tree. So if you're working with a child, their brain is going to be very similar to their parent's brain. And we work with lots of families. We work with, a lot of times it's one parent who has a similar brain pattern to a child that has difficulties. So we'll work with that parent and the child, and it works out beautifully. But remember that that can create dynamics because they're both using a brain pattern that's giving them challenges. Okay, so that's semester brain. Summer brain is characterized, and one of the links that I gave you talks about brain drain. And I'm going to tell you something about brain drain in just a few minutes, but that'll be important to communicate to your patients about why summer training is beautiful. But brain drain is basically when kids are out of school for 2.5, 3 months at a time. There is a proven significant regression in learning. 2 to 3 months slide back is what it basically is, because a child doesn't spend time thinking. And I am giving you a link for a really awesome time.com article that's filled with science. So that's going to be in your reading link, but it's also in the science link as well, because it's filled with science and it's really, really cool. But so when there's no thinking, we can have a regression in learning. And now I want you to think about this from a neurofeedback standpoint, is that that's because a person is not being challenged to use low beta. So the good part of summer brain is that high beta comes down because that stress comes down. The bad part about summer brain is that many kids, and this also falls on socioeconomic status lines, especially poorer kids, don't have the opportunities to engage their mind in thinking. And remember, every time you are in relaxed thinking that is fun and engaging, that increases low beta. And we're going to revisit that. Electronic use can go up during the summer because parents are busy and children can be more unattended or left to their own whims. So routines around electronic use can be very, very important. Kids get more sleep, so I let my kids sleep in. And it's good and it's bad because sometimes they'll sleep till 1 o'clock, but that means they're getting solid 15 hours of sleep. And I know that a lot of the times during the school year, they're very sleep deprived, even though they go to bed early. Kids are growing. It takes a lot of energy to grow. And many afternoons, my middle daughter will fall asleep in her bed for an hour, just tired from the social aspect of middle school and all the thinking that she's done. So summertime can be a great time to catch up on sleep. And there's less routine, so I might as well talk about it now. So I told you about my school routine. So if you don't have children, or you haven't been in that area of life for a little while, just to characterize it again for how this impacts families, is that it's important to set up a routine, but we set up a different routine in summer, and it is so totally awesome. There's lots of going to the pool. We have a pool that's in our neighborhood, so we venture up as a family. I have what I call the triple F's, forced family fun, and when someone doesn't want to do it, I tell them that's why it's the triple F's and not the double F's, family fun, right? So when we have the triple F's, the kids have to come up to the pool with us, but they do not have to stay. They have to stay just for a little while. I do this with movie night too. Actually, I do this a lot. So it's the triple F's. They have to participate a little, but I also won't torture myself by having 5 children at the pool with me for hours that don't want to be there. I'll enjoy my time with the ones that do after everybody has participated a little bit in forced family fun. Our days start a lot later, so I let the kids sleep in, and I get work done very early in the morning, which I usually do, but I have to stop to get them all ready for school. Now I can keep going. I'll get hours of work done early in the morning, which frees me up to be able to spend more relaxed time with them in the afternoon and the evenings. So we'll go to the pool. I will pick outings for us. Yes, they sometimes don't like them either. They were mocking me yesterday saying that our family activities are to go to the zoo. I'm like, yeah, we're going to the zoo again this year. I suppose that's nostalgic and cultural familially because that my parents took me to the zoo when I was young. So we always take one trip to the zoo, whether they like it or not. But with having a lot of kids, it's difficult for us to do I guess a lot of really active things, and it becomes very expensive too. But I call it affordable movie night on Tuesdays. So we have what we call the Movie Watchers Club because my family likes movies. So on Tuesdays we'll go and watch movies, which is really fun. All of us will go together, and we basically go most Tuesdays in the summer. So that's pretty cool. Then we'll also do, other family activities, but we'll do those in the evening and we'll spend time together. There's lots of porch sitting. My house, I think, has 5 different porches on purpose because I love porch sitting. So the kids will join my hubby and I, and we literally just sit around and we talk. Someone asked me what it was like having a big family, a woman that I know who wants to have children. She doesn't have children yet. And she's overthinking probably how many kids she should have. I'm like, I suppose I should have thought about that at all. But with having 6 kids all together, like sitting around just chatting and meals and things like that is a big part of our family culture. So we do more of that when we have more time because during the school year, there's lots of running around. There's lots of quick meals many times during the week in the year. And a lot of families do this, which I don't think it's necessarily a great thing. Actually, I know it's a bad thing in terms of science, but we don't always eat dinner together because, my hubby doesn't get home from work till 7 p.m. So the idea is lots of families are doing that. But if they make up for that in their summer routine with more downtime together, that can be a really beneficial thing for their brain type. So to bring it back to brains and what we're talking about, you can see the benefit of less routine, but there has to be a routine because no routine at all contributes to brain drain. More vacations and travel. So we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but that can be good and bad. Travel is very taxing, and the triple F's, forced family fun, can be very difficult for a lot of families, especially with the brain patterns for ADHD and anxiety. That can be a recipe for disaster. So my kids are pretty well regulated, and my husband and I are well regulated, and lots of confined time together can be very difficult for all of us, which is why I will let people out of that triple F if, need be. So travel is very difficult on brain performance. So I want to give you a couple tips to share with your patients, because when you share this with them, it builds confidence in your ability to care for them, that you know about brains and how brains are impacted. And a woman said this to me on Monday. She's like, you're the first person that has validated how I've been feeling for a long time. She's a woman who's had multiple concussions, and she is choosing to drive opposed to flying because she said flying bothers her. And she said all of her other doctors told her that changes in pressure don't impact her, but that's not true. Changes in air pressure can definitely impact the concussed brain, but just the amount of work to the nervous system that traveling involves can be very taxing. And I work with lots and lots of people who need more support when they travel. So one little tip is for them to close their eyes and not do anything while they're flying. And so either just listen to music, put earplugs in, which will help to reduce stress from not having to listen to other people's conversations, because ears are funny things like that, that if your ears are open and you're in a confined space, you're forced to listen to other people's conversations, which could stress you out whether you know it or not, and increase high beta. When high beta goes up while you're traveling, that's going to most likely create more problems. Put earplugs in or listen to music. That will help alpha go up if you close your eyes, because when you close your eyes, alpha increases, helps to relax the brain and the body, and to take away the level of taxing on the nervous system. And it totally works. Every time I travel, I loop a couple meditation type of songs in my ears, and I try to meditate the whole time, and I'll read just a little, usually just to throw something in to think about, and then just relax the rest of the time. Another thing that can happen during the summer, and I know it happens for my children, even though there's lots of them, they have more isolation from their friends and from other people, unless, you know, we go out of our way to make sure that they still have friendships and social aspects of life. So again, these characterizations are not true for every person, but when you're working with someone, and that's going to be our starting point in just a second, is that you want to think about where their brain pattern is starting and how these characteristics are actually impacting them. So we're going to talk about the importance of 3 factors: sustained attention for learning during the school year, cognitive load, then how that impacts stress and fatigue. Cognitive load is basically the work that you have to put in to take all the information that you're learning and create a knowledge base. And as you know, if you've ever learned anything new, which I'm sure some of you have, that can be very, very taxing to the nervous system. When we're talking about attention, we are talking about working with people who struggle with ADHD, and this is a little bit older, not even older, this is just a different graphic than the one that is in the article that I'm linking in the recording in the course in Rizuku, in the course for this monthly coaching. If you have been in there, and if not, I'll just describe it to you real quickly. The webinar video and slides will be the top activity in the lesson. The second is called the science, and the third is the reading. The link for the article in the Time magazine, which is reading, because what you do with that link is share it with prospective patients, because it's a cool, snappy read that makes a ton of points. And actually in that article, they present neurofeedback towards the bottom of the article as a non-medicine approach to helping people with ADHD. And there's also in the science tab in the course, there's one article about the longevity of ADHD and the familial components, showing that it runs in families and that it really doesn't go away into adulthood. It just morphs into different behaviors, not good behaviors, and they're listed there. So, and there's an article on sleep and how ADHD and sleep can really go back and forth, kind of perpetuating each other. But the global takeaway from this infographic and the one that's in that article is that ADHD is off the charts in the United States, and it is getting more prevalent by the minute. So this is a graph of medication use. The one in the link is incidence, I believe it is, of ADHD. And you can see where I live in North Carolina, it's one of the darkest states for medication use, and it's also one of the highest states that have the most incidence of ADHD. And I'm not going to go into why that is, but it's in the article, which will probably be interesting for you. You can read it. So ADHD is up. So when we're talking about semester brain and summer brain, you know, I've given you the examples for me and my kids, but we're pretty typical people without the ADHD or anxiety brain pattern. So when we're talking about people with ADHD, to sustain attention for a long time across the school day, and especially if we're talking about kids in the public system like my kids, that the only break they get is a 15-minute walk in a circle, that becomes very, very taxing on their nervous system. I'm going to show you some graphs in just a second in the difference, but what that will look like is, first of all, their delta or theta might go up because they can sustain that attention across 45-minute periods or an hour and a half periods, depending upon how old they are. At the same time, their high beta is going to increase because as they try to sustain attention, their cognitive workload is going up, and that means their brain has to kick it into overdrive and will use more high beta. You know what that means? Increased stress. This infographic, we're not going to read through the whole thing, but the point is stress affects the whole body. And like this says, 60 to 80% of primary care doctor visits are related to stress. And yet 3% of patients get any help on managing stress. Let me tell you what a person can do to manage their stress: neurofeedback. And then it's very important for you to be able to give people lifestyle tips. And that's why I created the Harness Your Brain course, so that you can have people sign up for Harness Your Brain, and in the end, they have a toolbox to be able to keep their own stress down. Because right here, headaches, dizziness, ADD, and ADHD, it is a two-way street, and we already know that. ADHD creates more high beta, which creates stress. More high beta feeds back and creates more delta, which is overwhelm and burnout, and mental health challenges, back and forth, back and forth. Grinding teeth and tension in the jaw, that's proven to be from an increase in high beta. And, you know, the list goes on. If you read the rest of it, it's all associated with stress. Kids are under a lot of stress. So during the school year, there's a lot more stress to deal with. And we're going to talk about it in a second. Is it good or bad to train when kids are more stressed? I'll just give you the one-liner, is that it can be very beneficial to train a person's brain in the mode they're in most of the time. So if most of the time they're in semester mode, then there's definitely no reason to wait till next summer, because you're training them in a real-world approach, how they are existing on a daily basis. But if their brain is more relaxed in summer, you might be able to make more headway while their brain's in a more relaxed state, but you cannot burn through lots of sessions, because when they go back to school, their brain will switch back into semester mode. Okay, so we'll talk about that more in just a second. But looking at what we have here in terms of sleep. So we know sleep is good for your memory, it's good for your lifespan, it's good for creativity, it's good for attention. Weight loss is a benefit to what we're talking here. But memory, creativity, and attention, all of those things are very important for learning and for being able to sustain attention in the classroom, and to be able to increase your cognitive workload and to decrease your stress while you're doing it. So sleep is crucial, and many kids are not getting enough sleep during the school year. So we're going to talk about tips in a minute. But okay, so let's think about what our starting point is. And we're going to look quickly at the two brain map types. And again, these are just ones that I've gotten off of the internet. And I still use internet images, so that when people Google if they're looking for neurofeedback and they Google it, the images I'm presenting to them are congruent with the other images that are out there. So congruency is hugely important to me, even though this is not the representation of the map that I use. Okay, so this is the raw data for ADHD. And what we're noting here is that in the frontal sections, and I have to use my cursor to show you, when we see these waves loosen and get higher in amplitude, and here you can see it's at FP1, FP2, F3, F4, some at C3, here at FZ. And in the article that I'm sharing with you, it just confirms that ADHD is in the frontal lobe many times. And again, this example that I'm showing here with all the red and the yellow and the orange is across the whole brain, but many times it affects mostly the frontal lobe. And in a classic sense, beta would be low, and that's how we get the theta to beta ratio of 3:1. But what I want you to see is that as these waves loosen up, it means that the person's brain is slowing down. So what I want you to think about for just a second, I'm going to show you an example in a minute. When a child is at school and they've been trying to sustain attention for longer and longer time frames, and their brain is fatiguing and they're not able to do that, what happens is these waves increase, slowing their brain down, making it even more difficult to attempt to sustain attention. So think about that for a second. What will that look like on your trend graphs? What it will look like is an increase in delta and theta, especially if you see a downward trend in training, delta and theta coming down, then delta and theta going back up and loosening up. That means that that brain can't hold the pattern down low, squashing delta and theta, and that it's loosening up and it's more difficult for the brain to be able to sustain attention. And that's for shows in my office, and probably most of your offices, that's for a show that they find engaging. So imagine what's happening in their math class that they don't like at all. So an example of how this might play out for a child with ADHD during the semester is that across their day, they are trying really hard to keep delta and theta down, and delta and theta keeps trying to go back up. And especially if you work with children who have true ADHD and have a diagnosis, and if you ask them how they do in school, parents will say it all the time. It's really weird. He's great in math, but he's failing social studies. And then he's great in everything else. I've heard this a million times, but the course names change. It's because math is very salient and makes sense and clicks for that child, so they're able to sustain that attention and keep delta and theta down for the duration of math because they're interested and intrigued, but social studies just doesn't click for them. So when they get to social studies, their brain literally goes up, up, up with delta and theta. Their brain checks out. They are just not able to engage with social studies at all because it's not salient and it doesn't make sense to them, so the brain checks out. So that's why there'll be pockets of achievement and struggle in children with ADHD's in their academic profile. So that's why it's happening, and that's why it can be more challenging for a child with ADHD to engage with neurofeedback during the school year, because their brain could be tired from having to try to do that all day long. Usually you'll see, again, an excess of high beta from a brain that's trying to hold on to it all day long in terms of being able to sustain attention. Another thing that you'll see behaviorally is that kids will be able to regulate themselves in the classroom, and then they lose it when they get home. So there's a lot of mood disorder and severe dysregulation at home. And I always tell the parents that that's a badge of honor, as difficult as it is to wear, that they've had to spend their school day regulating themselves while their brain is trying to dysregulate itself because of its pattern and because of different aspects of the environment across the day. And they just don't have the energy to regulate themselves anymore when they get home. Giving kids time can be very important for that reason. And we're going to keep going, or I won't ever get to the last slides. This is an example of an anxiety brain functioning pattern. What I want you to notice, and I'm just showing you the raw data so that you can wrap your mind around it, is that look how tight and dark these waves are. So if you remember, high beta is very fast and tight energy. So when we're talking about hertz, high beta is 35 hertz, let's just call it, super fast, where delta is 2 hertz, not fast, very slow, up and down, versus very fast. And the brain is literally cranking at that very fast electrical speed, which then shows up on the brain map as high beta and high beta. And so again, remember, that means that that brain is in overdrive. It's stuck in overdrive. It's stuck in super fast mode. and it can create a lot of anxiety for the person and perpetuate itself. Okay, so my point about that is that the starting point matters when we think about semester brain versus summer brain. So the easiest way to think about it is if you're working with a kiddo with ADHD and anxiety, the semester is going to be a more difficult time for the brain to change, but it's also going to be more true to form. So it's a great idea to train. I like to train brains in all states because the goal in the end is neurological regulation to create self-regulation at all times of the day, at every season of the year, at all times around the clock, in every single environment. So to be able to do that, training a brain during the semester is great, training a brain during the summer is great, training in the morning is good, training in the evening is good. All you have to remember to do is look for the differences in the trend graphs and know what it means for that particular client. You can't forget that. So you have to remember where their starting point is on their map and on their first trend graph, and then look for differences based upon if they train in the morning or the afternoon, if they're training in the summer versus the semester. And so I wanted to make sure I included head injury or cognitive decline. So for someone who's older, the aspects around the year in terms of semester or summer might not affect them as much. But another reason that our Neurofeedback Expert brain shift programs are 1 year long is because most people have triggers across a year that affect their way that their brain is performing. It might not be semester or summer, but for example, family. I have a woman whose in-laws came into town for a week. You should have seen the differences in her brain pattern. It was uncanny. And I've spoken with many of you. Let me see. I'm trying to see how many people are with us today. I've spoken with many of you because I'm really excited to be creating a brain map and trend graph interpretation and communication course. And it'll be ready in the fall, but I'll definitely have her graphs in there to show she has severe anxiety and depression. And we were doing great. We had a beautiful response to training. We saw a nice downward trend. Her alpha's off the charts, like I've never seen before. But we have a downward trend, and her in-laws came into town. Her trend graphs were this crazy chaotic pattern, and alpha went through the roof because having her in-laws in town really impacted her brain functioning. And I'm sure some of you can relate. I know I can, not with my mother-in-law. She's the sweetest mother-in-law in the world because we barely ever see her. And actually I have a very nice relationship since I've moved away via text. That's a great way to have a relationship with someone, but we're going back soon to visit my family. And if you've known me for any amount of time, you know that I've stepped up my neurofeedback training. I always do. I do tons of neurofeedback before I go spend time with my family of origin, as we call it in the business. And I do lots of meditation, and the tools I'm going to share with you on the last page of this slide to share with your patients, I take advantage of. But so for a person with cognitive decline, the holidays can be difficult because there's more going on, which can tax their system. A person with a head injury, if they try to go back to work, that might show up in their graph. So you really need to think about across the year how a person's brain is being impacted. And that really is the point of semester brain versus summer brain, because what we see many times is that during the end of the year exams, brains start to unravel a little, and then they get much better as summer comes, after that difficult time. Okay, so moving right along. This is an article on how to prevent brain drain. I did not put it in the resources in the course, but it's here in the PowerPoint slides if you want to click on it. The idea is, and I've already told you, 2/3 regression when they're not engaged over summer. But the reason I put this slide in before I show you the graphs is that I want to encourage you to think about the use of neurofeedback could prevent brain drain. If you are using a protocol that increases production of alpha and low beta, you're basically training delta and theta down, training high beta down, most likely in some regard, and then training up that low beta. So when the child is not engaged in school, this can be a perfect way to prevent brain drain, and that's a way you can communicate it to patients, because you'll actually be boosting the speed that they would be using for learning. But we're going to give them some tips too. Okay, so here's an example of semester brain. So here we see, and no matter what system you use, the line colors will be different, but you can see how the black line is delta, and you can just read it when you get the slides too. Theta is the dark blue line. High beta is the yellow line. We want to see that being the lowest line on this graph and on your graphs too. Alpha is the light blue line, and then low beta is the green line. So what we want to see is a beautiful downward trend of the use of delta and theta. So, and this is a kiddo who has ADHD and who struggles, and this is old, so he had ADHD, thankfully. He really struggles. You can see how this brain is struggling to come down, and it has these big spikes up and down, showing that the brain is trying to slow itself back down by using excessive delta, but is coming down the response to training due to neurofeedback. We have a nice downward trend until 12 minutes, and then we see this loosening up happening, making it much more difficult for him to be able to keep his brain pattern down. Like I talked about, we see a little bit of a plateau, but it's moving in the wrong direction at the end. What I want you to notice is that high beta has an average of 12.3. It's much higher than alpha and low beta, and it's across the board, but it has a nice reduction, which is beautiful. So if you just look at this, and we're talking about the averages, but it starts around 15. It has a plateau in the 15 range, and it decreases to below 10 to 9 at the end of this session. Gorgeous response to training, but big need during the semester. Then we have summer brain, and you can see it's still starting high, but it's coming down and staying down for much longer across the session. And here's what I really wanted to share with you is look at high beta. It's starting below low beta where we want it. It's below alpha across the entire session. Its average is 6.53, which is half of what it was during the semester. And it trains, and I always tell people that ideally we see it below low beta, but intertwined and just right here, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you can see the major difference between semester brain and summer brain and how this brain is responding to training and where the levels are at overall. Okay, so I have the brainwave image is in the way of those words, but I'm going to tell you what they are. Okay, so you also want to be able to provide tips for people. So the image I put there is for binaural beats. So it's kind of like AVE if you use a system that has audio-visual entrainment, but this is audio entrainment. So it's not neurofeedback at all. And I like to recommend this for people. It's an app that they can get on their phone. It used to be free. I think now it's $1.99. And what happens is I like it because I'm not giving them neurofeedback to use at home for such an affordable, price, but I'm giving them another brain-based resource. So the way that it works is the way binaural beats work is the sound goes into their ears at the frequency that you're programming it for, and the sounds will cancel each other out so you don't hear them, but that frequency will attune the brain. So if we set it for deep relaxation, it will increase alpha, and when you actually have the app, it tells you what each programmed selection, what it's actually doing, what it's putting in, theta or delta or alpha. So deep relaxation is presumably going to have a component of theta increase. So you have to be careful to help the person select the proper selection for their brain type and tell them when to use it. So the idea is if it's someone with anxiety, you want them to use deep relaxation before bed, because that will reduce their high beta by putting alpha and theta into their brain. And we know as we shift into sleep, our brains make more theta. This will help their brain to be able to do that. Okay, so that, I jumped ahead because the image was there, but that is giving them an app while they're on vacation during the summer. People ask all the time, if I come in for summer, I'm going away for a week, is that going to be bad? And I tell people no. I use the rule of thumb that at 7 sessions is what science shows it takes to get enough of a flywheel going. but that then we can recommend a resource, and I don't tell them that until they're in care with us, what that resource is, and this is it. Okay, so let's jump back to semester brain for a second. This is the biggest thing I tell people, and when I tell people this, they love it. And it comes from traditional models of a therapy approach. It's called scaffolding, and you've probably heard me say it before because it works. So if you're building a building, you cannot build floor number 29 without building floor 2, and then 3, and then 4. You have to scaffold the skills. So during the semester, what happens is kids with ADHD and then compensatory anxiety, I already told you, they're spending all their energy regulating themselves and trying to get through their school day, and they're absolutely exhausted and their brains are stressed out when they get home. Many families will make their kids go right into homework time and not give them a break until they have completed their homework. Most kids with ADHD and anxiety cannot do that. They need a break, and then they need to be scaffolded to be successful with homework time. What that looks like practically is they get a break and they should go outside and move their bodies. So when my kids get home, everybody knows they have to scatter and go do something in the world, as I call it, before they can have any electronic use, and their homework has to be done. So then what happens is, for kids with ADHD and anxiety, if they can only handle 5 minutes of homework, that's how they do homework, in 5-minute blocks. And usually the parents have some sense, and you can use the graphs actually. So like we saw from the young man that I showed you, on his initial graph, he had 12 minutes until his brain maxed out. So that's a good starting point for you to share with families. And I do it all the time, especially if you can see that consistently across trend graphs, which I see all the time, that delta pattern starts going back up consistently at 12 minutes. So the recommendation is to do homework for 12 minutes and then let him take at least a 5-minute break, and let him, hopefully not on electronics, but moving around and just, kind of letting their brain come down, and then go back into it for another 12 minutes so that they're successful, celebrating a win every single time they've completed 12 minutes. So sometimes you can give kids, if they're into Instagram, they can look at Instagram for 1 minute after they've moved their body around, because that becomes the reward. So remember, we're trying to reward so that we are creating a positive feedback loop. The frequent breaks are not just breaks. They're neurointegration. So the approach has to be different. And if you work with business people that are stressed out, they have to understand our brains need breaks. They were not designed to just go 24/7. We need breaks built into our day, all of us, kids and adults alike, and we need to get good sleep at night. And the break is not slacking. It's essential for productivity because it's neurointegration. And that's why if you've ever had the best idea you've ever had in the shower, it's because you've given your brain the break it needs to be able to have the breakthrough for the thing that you were working on. That is how it works. It's integration. Another thing I tell people during the semester, which I will uncover by the time I put the slides in the course, is that for them to find their meditation, we all have a thing that we like to do that puts our brain into a really good mode of calm focus. If we're in calm focus, we're using alpha, we're using SMR, we're using low beta. So for me, I love to read. Reading really, you know how that goes, geeks me out. I love to read. I have stand-up paddle boards, and we live close to a lake, so I take the boards out on the lake. Totally chills my brain out, increases alpha and SMR, brings down any high beta that might be trying to go up. And we want to try to do those things during the semester on a daily basis or every other day, definitely on a weekly basis. So when I work with people, you know, I have one gentleman who loves to play pool, but he never does. Go play pool, billiards, pool. I have a woman who loves to knit, never does. Start knitting. So you need to find the thing that you love to do. My husband golfs 2 times a week usually, and our life is so busy and crazy. We are always going. That is very, very important for him to be able to get that break. I had one guy, I gave a presentation, there was 500 people in the crowd, and the gentleman stood up and asked me if I would repeat that, and he had his phone out, and he said that he was going to share that with his wife. And I thought it was pretty funny. Of course, it was a huge room of people, and they all laughed. Okay, during summer, it could be the opposite. The brain's going during the semester, but in the summer, like we just talked about, there can be regression because we're not getting into low beta. So reading or learning something fun. So yesterday, I signed my husband up because I was busy working. I had my hubby take our youngest to the library. She got so excited about the reading challenge, and she picked up 3 books, and she's been basically reading this chapter book on and off for the last day since then. That was exactly what I was hoping for. So she'll engage herself in reading, and it's pretty cool. And then what my older kids will do, my older daughter loves to watch things on YouTube that are videos on YouTube that are very educational. So it's pretty neat, like being able to use technology in a friendly way like that. So my son is working towards Eagle Scout and Boy Scouts, which is really cool. So he spent all day Saturday building libraries those little libraries that they put in neighborhoods, and he had to do all the fine work on that. And it's awesome using his brain in that way. So you get the point. Find ways to use your brain to increase low beta, not high beta. Use the app when you're on vacation. And neuro meditation, I use my MuseCalm headband. Again, it's not neurofeedback, and it's MuseCalm, and get it for yourself, especially if you find you don't go on your neurofeedback system as often as you should. I keep my MuseCalm headband next to my bed, basically. So if I feel like I'm going to take a power nap, I'll use it to chill my brain out in the middle of the day. And it works very similarly to neurofeedback, but it's an easy way just to bring your brain down, and it gives you a graph in real time if your brain was calm, neutral, or active. So it's not a great resource for ADHD, but it's definitely a good resource to bring your brain down from high beta use. So anybody who has that aspect could really benefit from it. Okay, so that's how we're going to encourage our brain performance by season. So this recording should be ready by the end of the day, and we'll get it into the course. And I hope that you have gleaned some information on the benefits of training during the semester when a person's brain is in its kind of true form, albeit more stressed out and having more difficulty sustaining attention, versus the summer where it's more relaxed. And again, that's why our programs are a year long, so that we have a combination of the two, so that we can train people's brains in both modes to try to give them the biggest bang for their buck. Okay, have an awesome day, and I'll see you next month. Thanks.